with me?
Yep. Start.
Just Kate.
It's hard to say what my mother looked like because she was always my mother, not a person, I suppose. You always look at, I don't know if everybody does, but I looked at my parents in an idealistic sort of way. So, yeah, describing her features would be difficult. I suppose a lot of my taste in art is due to my mother. She always had interesting tastes, and I'm so appreciative of it. She was an extremely literate person, which I've only just become in the last couple of years, but I can appreciate that part of her now too, as well. The kind of connection you get from reading is just, I can't get it anywhere else.
She had jet black hair. She was quite short. I think her face was a lot like mine. We both got like the snaggle teeth thing going on. And she has beautiful skin. Like, I really remember her skin just being so soft.
He was probably not a very tall man, just a kind of average, maybe even a little bit less than average guy. But he seemed big to us, you know, he seemed really tall to us. For us, I think at least the three girls would agree he's a superhero, but that's kind of retrospectively. And his last placement at the time of his death, he was going to become one of the youngest or the youngest principals in New South Wales.
I was working at a teachers' college in Paddington, and I was working in the library, and Jeff was a student at the university, and he used to come into the library and eventually came into the library a lot. And he then invited me to go to functions where the students went, and we decided then and there that we wanted to be together. We were married in 18 months later, and 9 months later had twins.
I went out to a movie with a friend of mine. I think it was Terminator, Rise of the Machines. Rubbish. So I was isolated in this movie theatre with my phone off, as you do in a cinema. And during this time, unbeknownst to me, my mother was calling her boyfriend, he was a musician, so he was out on a gig and not close by. And I suppose she needed attention, or whatever she needed at the time, she couldn't get from him. So it developed into a really, it developed into a really abusive argument, and I got a call just as I was leaving the cinema because her boyfriend was trying to call me the whole time, I suppose. And he said, I need you to go home now, and I need you to check on your mother, which, he didn't talk to me much, was a very serious phrase. Still, being as I was, I didn't like him too greatly, so as urgent as the situation was, I also wanted to be anti-authoritarian and stubborn and just go, you know, no, fuck you, I don't want to do that. But, of course I did. That's where home was. I went home anyway at that time. And, yeah, to check on her, all I did is I peered in the door and she just looked like she was asleep. And I remember the TV was on and AFL was on or something. She doesn't watch that, so I just switched it off and I left the room and I got another call. Hysterical. He was hysterical. My mother's boyfriend. Go check on her. Go in there and check on her. And when I went into the room and turned on the light, I immediately saw that something was completely wrong.
He had a massive heart attack, and died in my arms. And, you know, because he was so young, you don't ever think of a heart attack. So I didn't know. I thought he was choking. I didn't realise. And you know, in hindsight, that's what made me realise people should always learn resuscitation things, because I had no idea how to do it. And I tried the best I could do, but when I learned how to do it, I realised that I hadn't done it right. But you know, nothing would have saved him anyway, because he would have been dead, because he died very quickly.
She reckons she bumped her leg on something and thought it was a bruise for a really long time, or a lump. She thought she had shin splints the whole holiday when we were walking around in Japan, and she was in a lot of pain. We didn't think anything of it really. Came back to Australia. This lump had just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. So Mum finally went to go get it biopsied and tested, and it turned out to be a sarcoma, which is like a cancer cousin of a melanoma. And it was just here on her leg, and when they removed it, it was the size of just smaller than a tennis ball. It was huge. And then, I would say a year or more later, she had this cough that was really persistent, and it turns out that the leg cancer had obviously sent out little spores, and it had travelled through her bloodstream and ended up in her left lung in the bottom. She had half her lung removed. Another year after that, it came back in her throat. And then, you know, we tried chemo then. But it was so aggressive. It came to a point where she couldn't breathe anymore. It had closed up all of her airway.
My dad and we were painting, so my sister and I were helping our dad paint the day before. And then we went to bed like any other night, I guess. And then the next day, my mum called us up. We all sat around her on her bed, and she just said something like, "You don't have a dad anymore." It's like, what does that even mean? And, you know, that's all I really remember. And then just a lot of chaos, with people coming and going and not really understanding what had happened. And, you know, superheroes really don't die, so it doesn't really make any sense at all. So we went back to school, you know, and people didn't ask anything. People never said anything, so it was like nothing had happened. But to me, everything had happened. The world was just a totally different place, and it would never be the same again, you know.
My mother was lying there, on her back, and her mouth was agape, and completely, I suppose that's when I went into panic mode, hung up on her boyfriend. I said something like, "Just get here now," hung up, and called an ambulance. And as they do, they told me when I called the ambulance, they walked me through how to do CPR, which I knew already, but in that situation, you don't know. You forget. So in going through the steps of CPR, I knew. I'd never seen a dead body before, but I knew she had let herself go. Basically, when I blew air into her lungs, just only an awful sound came out. I knew. She was cold. She was on a waterbed, which kept parts of her warm, but she was completely cold. So she was very long gone by the time I had got there. And even so, even though I knew that very early in that process, I just gave her CPR to the very best of my ability until the ambulance arrived, which was strange because, as I said, I was never intimate with my mother, and this is the closest we had really ever been. This is the only time I had ever really touched her.
Jeff's shirt, and I used to have it all the time. Well, not all the time, for quite a long time. I used to just cuddle it. And I never washed it. It took me a long time. It wasn't until probably just before we left where we were living, and I finally had to get rid of everything and not take it with me. So that was hard.
When I got my first promotion and I came out and I just sat outside and go, you know what? He'd be really proud of me, you know?
I talk to her in my brain a lot. I think I just thank her. She's the reason why I am who I am, and I'm really proud of who I am, and I think that's a lot to do with Mum and the values she's given me, and that's all Mum. So I think I'd just, I'd thank her.
When Jeff died, I knew how you could live your life a bit differently because you're lonely. You could look for solace in different things, and so I think I became a lot more understanding of people and what may be happening that you don't ever give a thought to.
I'd love to talk to her. I'd love to talk to her as an adult. I've only seen what it's like to be an adult and have parents. I've never felt what it's like. I'm not sure I can. So, I'd just love her to know that I understand now. And I don't blame her. I understand just how hard it is.